Brought to you by Bookspots.com.
The Naxman, a story written by Srinidhi Ranganathan. Like, share, subscribe. Happy listening. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced eerily across the streets of Oak Hollow. Nightfall brought an uneasy atmosphere, the kind that settled over the small town like a thick fog. In the heart of Oak Hollow stood the peculiar Decker mansion, a crumbling relic from another era that housed more secrets than memories. It was here that the most mysterious man in the world, known only as Naxman, resided. Naxman was an enigma. Standing at an astonishing 7 feet tall with a neck that seemed to stretch and bend in ways that defied natural law, he commanded attention from anyone who glimpsed his towering figure. Despite his striking appearance, few dared approach him. Whispers followed Naxman everywhere, tales of unusual talents, tragic losses, and inexplicable events that seemed to orbit around him. The townsfolk chose to regard him as an oddity to be observed from a distance. But tonight, curiosity was steadily building. It was Halloween, the one night of the year when fear was a shared thrill instead of a silent dread. Children roamed the streets in costumes, and adults proceeded with hesitant laughter, all draped in the cloak of festivity. Yet, for many, there was an underlying current of intrigue as they stole glances towards the darkened windows of the Decker mansion. The local reporter, Avery Richards, stood outside the mansion's rusted gates, notebook clutched in one hand and pen poised in the other. She was new to Oak Hollow, drawn in by the peculiar stories that sprawled across small-town gossip. Naxman was her biggest lead, a chance to carve her name in the annals of journalism. Asking the questions of a ghost, she muttered to herself, her breath a visible puff against the chilly air. Avery was determined. She had followed up on every lead, tracked down every whisper of the townsfolk in hopes of uncovering what made Naxman tick. Or, perhaps, what made him break. Gathering her courage, she clasped the gate open, entering a garden that had long succumbed to the wild. Weeds sprawled like phantom fingers towards the cracked stone path. The door to the mansion yawned open, creaking under the weight of its own age. With a deep inhale, Avery stepped inside, letting the scent of old wood and dust envelop her. "Hello," she called, her voice echoing through the grand foyer. Shadows lurked in the corners, and as her eyes adjusted, she could make out the remnants of opulence, a chandelier hanging lifeless, faded wallpaper peeling away like forgotten memories. Naxman emerged from the depths of the darkness, his silhouette stark against the environment. His neck seemed to coil like a serpent around his elongated frame, looming over her as he stepped forward. "What brings you to my doorstep, journalist? Are you Naxman?" Avery stammered, her heart racing. She had seen the photos, but it was another thing entirely to face him. "Am I? Or am I merely a figment of your imagination?" he replied, voice low and melodic. Avery swallowed, steeling herself for the encounter she had long envisioned. "I'm here to understand your story. The world deserves to know who you really are." He looked at her, those deep-set eyes glinting with a mixture of curiosity and something else, perhaps amusement. "The world is not ready for the truth, my dear. What is curiosity but a mask worn by the fearful? Then share it with me." A way to peel off the mask, Avery encouraged, trying to maintain her composure. "Naxman," he said, stepping closer, "is merely a name. But the mind, therein lies the mystery." His gaze seemed to pierce through her. It unsettled her but also exhilarated her. "What do you mean?" she asked, intent on squeezing the answers from him. His laughter echoed, a strange melody that sent shivers across her skin. "What if I told you my neck is not what makes me a mystery? It is the stories that linger within me, the forgotten epochs I have witnessed." That was it. The spark ignited in her mind. "Then tell me your stories. Let me help you share them." The tension thickened, and for a moment, the air crackled. Avery felt the weight of those unspoken tales pressing down. After what felt like an eternity, Naxman nodded slowly. "Very well," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "But first, we must clear a path. Darkness often obscures the light, and not all things long buried wish to be uncovered." Before she could inquire further, Naxman's fingers beckoned towards the back of the mansion. Avery followed him through disheveled halls, each corner revealing remnants of a life lived in shadows, old photographs, dusty relics, and echoes of laughter trapped in the walls. As they entered a chamber cloaked in darkness, Naxman gestured toward a thick, black curtain swaying slightly in the draught. Behind this curtain lies my labyrinth, a passage through my memories and fears. Avery felt a pulse of apprehension. The air felt alive, charged with an energy that engulfed her. What lies beyond? Everything, he answered, and with that, he drew the curtain aside. A swirl of colors emerged, brilliant reds, blues, and greens danced chaotically, like a kaleidoscope of thoughts. Images flickered to life, faces of time-worn strangers and places long abandoned. I can take you through, but understand, he paused, tilting his head backward, some memories are not mine alone. They belong to others. Those who crossed paths with my existence. Avery nodded resolutely, adrenaline surging through her. They stepped into the unknown. The first memory consumed them, a scene of a war-torn landscape, gunfire exploding like thunder. Naxman stood tall within it, his neck extending above the chaos, relentlessly vigilant. Soldiers scrambled around him, but his gaze remained unflinching. He had navigated this world with both purpose and dread. Your height made you a target, Avery whispered, horrified yet captivated. Indeed, Naxman replied somberly, but being a target sometimes teaches survival. I became their shield. But the burden of witnessing death stays long after the battle's end. The next memory whisked them away to a desolate city, once teeming with life but now reduced to ash. Naxman moved through it as a ghost, the desperation of survivors lingering in the air, palpable and suffocating. No one we spoke to understood, he said, but they all needed help to escape the horrors they faced. I tried, but not all can be saved. Why do you carry such weight? Avery asked, sensing the anguish beneath his troubled demeanor. Because guilt is insatiable, Naxman replied, and it stretches like my neck, ever willing to grasp for the unreachable. With each memory they traversed, Avery felt her consciousness flickering between the ramifications of each moment and Naxman's profound loneliness. They had seen countless lives, stories woven into one tapestry of heartache. But as they reached a memory laden with blood and anguish, the air began to chill. The scene turned decidedly dark. Figures surrounded Naxman, chanting in haunting tones, the ground thick with grief as they summoned a terrible force. Avery felt a deadly chill run up her spine. What's happening? She gasped. You look trapped. They sought to use my peculiar form, a puppet to control fear itself, he muttered, flicking his gaze toward the horizon where shadows gathered. In that moment, I understood the truth of existence. Sometimes we are only as mighty as those who choose to wield us. Just as they began to withdraw from the harrowing moment, the curtain fluttered violently, drawing them back to the present as if something had been unleashed. They stumbled out, breathless. Avery's heart raced, the raw sense of danger permeating the air. What was that? She managed to choke out. Naxman's gaze hardened, reflecting concern. The past never remains buried when summoned. I should not have shared those memories with you, it awakens old foes. Suddenly, a low rumble tore through the mansion, and the ground quaked beneath them. Dust rained from the light fixtures as the walls groaned ominously. Panic set in, and Avery stumbled towards the door. We have to go, she urged, but Naxman stood his ground, neck twisting to scan the room. Not yet, he murmured. The truth requires confrontation. The weight of the past must be accepted. Light flickered, shadows crawling along the walls as a dark figure materialized from the depths of the room. It moved like smoke, slithering towards them, indistinguishable yet suffocating. Your secret will unravel, Naxman, it hissed, voice dripping with malice. You cannot hide from what you are. Avery's heart pounded in her ears as terror clawed at her throat. Run, she screamed. But Naxman stood unmoved, the fire of resolve burning in his strange eyes. I will face it. This creature feeds on fear, and fear thrives on ignorance. I have lived in its shadow for too long. She reached for him, panic rising. You don't have to do this alone. I'm with you. A smile crept across Naxman's lips, bittersweet. Then we will face it together. As the dark entity lunged, Naxman reached for Avery, drawing her against him with surprising strength. In that moment, reality twisted, the shades of memory sprang forth as armor, the weight of every shadow he had faced encasing them both. "What are you doing?" Avery shouted, feeling enthralled by the power surging between them. "Channeling," he responded, voice steady despite tremors erupting across the room. The shadows danced defiantly, flickering like flames around the darkness that threatened to engulf them. Naxman was a beacon amidst the chaos. The air thickened as memories united, bright colors radiating against the void. The dark figure recoiled as the warmth pressed against it, fought against the grasp of light that now encased Naxman and Avery. Suddenly, a blinding explosion of illumination filled the space, emanating from Naxman like a sun erupting from behind clouds. The dark figure snarled, dissipating into nothingness. Gasping, Avery stepped back, her heart still racing. Naxman fell to his knees, burnished light slowly dimming, the shadow that had plagued him dispersed but leaving him vulnerable. Avery knelt beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, we did it." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps today I learned I am not just a story, nor a cause of fear. I am both, interwoven with each life I encounter." "But why hide in darkness?" Avery asked gently. "You don't have to anymore. You are more than what haunts you." He took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. "Perhaps, in sharing my truth, I can finally let go of what once chained me." As dawn broke through the windows of the mansion, light pouring in like a balm, they emerged from the shadows. Together, Naxman and Avery stepped into a fragile world filled with promise, one where the weight of secrets could transform into stories worthy of acceptance. As they walked out into the waking town of Oak Hollow, the lingering mystery around Naxman began to shift. The enigmatic man with the longest neck had become a symbol, a tale spun from dark enchantments into something hopeful. And as the townsfolk began to awaken, they could sense a change in the air, a sense that the most mysterious man in the world had finally begun his journey toward redemption and light.